Hello and welcome to another Archaeo-Chat. Now, this is actually probably the first time that we've had an Archaeo-Chat that's somewhat similar, I guess, to the original concept.
To what we imagined it to be.
Yeah. And that is actually sitting around a table, first thing in the morning, dressed in your pyjamas. Okay, maybe I just wanted that. But the point is actually just being in the same room talking about something. And last night presented us with a wonderful opportunity to talk about a new TV series that's just come out, and it's called 10,000 BC.
Like the movie that came out a few years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Or BCE, you know. But 10,000 BC, and it's kind of like well, they're calling it Stone Age, Big Brother. So it's like it's like a reality show. People are thrown back into the Stone Age, and they're having to try and survive. Now, we've already seen the first episode. To be fair, we didn't see like the first 5 minutes of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What were your impressions?
Well, just by going what we saw in the first episode, my thoughts are it's not worth watching.
Mm-hmm.
It's dumbed down. It's predominantly sex sales kind of thing. So you've got people dressed up in loincloths, and they've got people, with boobs hanging out, things like that. Not saying that it's not necessarily what people would have looked.
Well, ironically, they probably didn't have any tops on.
Exactly. I mean, that's acculturation there, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because I said that before they changed into their fur, as it were. I've gone, I bet you they're going to have everything appropriately covered by the concept of modern day appropriateness. So that was one thing, but the other things as well is, for example, I mean, we did a workshop together the other day, and it was a prehistory workshop, and the core message that you were trying to teach the kids is there's no such thing as the Stone Age. That was it.
Yeah, or one Stone Age.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be fair, I suppose they were referencing the Mesolithic in this. They kept on talking about our Mesolithic ancestors, but then swapping that with Stone Age people, or even the word caveman at one point. But I suppose one of the things on the front of the clothes, what disappointed me, no pun intended there, was actually how primitive the clothes were.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, I mean, there have been photo shoots for this TV series where the women, they're sort of wearing, they look like was it Raquel Walsh in that really old film about the Stone Age, and
what my mum would say, troglodytes.
Well, yeah, possibly, yeah. But that sort of designer leopard skin kind of look.
Yeah.
They look like they're from the Flintstones.
Tarzan, the old Tarzans.
Yeah, and the guys don't look much better, and yet some of the most amazing stuff that we find in the archaeological record is to do with clothes making.
Yeah.
We've got very good evidence that actually they made clothes much better than the crap I'm wearing today.
Yeah.
I mean, better than you can buy. They put some parts of Savile Row, for example, in London to shame in terms of the intricacy of what they were making and how they were making it, and the furs that they were choosing to make their clothes. That actually brings me to my I suppose my first problem with this program, and that is that they were portraying a kind of a Northern European Mesolithic in a Bulgarian modern forest. Now, and also a wintertime Mesolithic in the forest, and that's what I find really strange. Because actually, there's a point in the program where they come up against the problem of having essentially a winter gear
in a summer environment.
And maggots turning up in the fur and this kind of thing. And that straight away tells you that's not what they did, because we know full well that, for example, in the winter in Northern Europe, the Mesolithic was all about being on the coast, and in the summer you went inland. Why aren't they giving these guys summer kit? Because they are inland, and it is the summer, and then they're in a forest, and they're going to have to hunt things like wild boar, etc. I don't understand why they're doing it, unless, and I think it probably is, because it looks good on TV. Furs and...
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. If it makes good TV, and I think this is predominantly what this show's about.
I mean, do you think some of the drama's been manufactured? Like, for example, like the hanging out. But there's a point where there's a deer that they butchered, and to be fair, they did get stuck into that. They used flint quite well.
Yeah.
But what was frustrating was that they just left it hanging around everywhere, and the next morning it was going rancid. And yes, okay, you can say that the social experiment is to have modern people having to try and deal with these issues, but that felt manufactured, because some of those guys had been apparently on survival course training, and
Yeah,
they'd known
they
to
would've-
put it near smoke or something, or keep the flies away. And also,
Yeah.
not to mention attracting wolves or other, wild animals. Like,
This is what they did say in the show, is that there are black bears and wolves
Yeah.
in that particular area. Ergo, you don't leave fresh meat out overnight for them to...
It's like a little buffet on all the branches. Every branch had it was like a Christmas tree of
It
meat.
was. I'm sure the interesting thing to me is that the way they may have thought about that. So, for example, they thought their food was safe in a tree that wasn't over 6 foot tall, because bears can't climb, obviously. Wink, wink. But the other interesting thing is that any good bushman or anyone that's decent with the wilderness would know, number one, you don't leave food out like that. Number two, you don't leave food out like that close to where you're camping. Bringing predator animals close to your camp is not a good idea unless you're going to hunt them, and I can tell you now, people in the Mesolithic would not hunt animals which are just as likely to kill them. I mean,
They also, when it comes to kill sites, what we find in the archaeological record are usually the front half of an animal somewhere in a random kill site.
Yeah.
And then the rear, the haunch, the big bits of meat have been taken away back to the camp.
Yeah.
So you leave the bloody carcass out somewhere to distract big animals from where you're living. And then you take the bits that you want and go home with them. And there's been none of that kind of contextual... If you're going to do the experiment, do it properly. I mean, it just feels a little like it's basically... Look at these people, and also they've chosen people who are, after 2 days, they're going, I want to go home. But you volunteered for this experience.
there was a
Embrace it.
63-year-old woman that didn't make it past literally 5 minutes into the video.
Well, yeah, but she that was sunstroke or
Yeah,
shock,
sure.
wasn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the stupid thing. Sunstroke in the middle of Bulgarians. Idiots. But here's the other thing. They're all POMs as well, which makes it highly I think they did that on purpose because they complain about everything. It makes it more entertaining. It's not to say
It's too warm, it's too wet, it's too... Well, there's no weather. I'm complaining about no weather.
That's the interesting thing as well. And I mean, there's so many facets of this program that we could go into. For example, the social construction of, you've pulled people out of a modern day society, people with families, wives, husbands, children, things like that, and you've basically thrown them all in together into 3 varying sized huts.
53 days as well, apparently.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So, I mean, not to say that people aren't going to get, single people and things won't get touchy-touchy, but I mean, their focus is going to be, is this person married, and they're going to start fondling somebody else in a hut. It's
But I suppose the relationship element to one side, what we were talking about last night was the fact that actually these people won't have any... For example, there's a woman in there who's a vegetarian. No, and I'm not saying that it's not possible to have been a vegetarian.
No, not at all. Yeah.
But highly unlikely, because you wouldn't have been brought up with the sense that killing an animal is inhumane. Actually, that phrase "inhuman," being inhuman to animals. Now, that's not to say that people in the past were cruel.
No.
As far as we can tell, they probably lived in essentially some sort of, for want of a better word, balance. They sort of saw themselves as a continuum of the environment that they were living in. So you probably wouldn't have a problem with killing a deer. Other things, like for example, as well. These guys aren't looking at the landscape in the same way that Mesolithic people would have done. Now, I'm not saying one can replicate that. I don't think even some of the best Mesolithic minds around at the moment don't know how people lived, for example, in Britain in the Mesolithic completely. But the fact that they're going to be walking past potential medicines, potential foods, or just focusing on hunting as well. It's that all the guys going hunting.
Yes, so because we had this conversation last night about indigenous populations, and how basically you're brought up from a young age learning about your local flora and fauna, the different uses and things like that, and that takes a very long time to learn. And I can tell you now that people who live a more traditional lifestyle in indigenous Australian communities have a vast knowledge of local medicines and things like that. Not all of them, obviously. We're talking about individuals, but one thing that the anthropologists of Australia are saying was a horrible loss was the fact that when the indigenous communities were decimated, they lost all this knowledge,
Mm.
lost all of it. So, and this is an interesting thing. I mean, these people didn't have written records, which means that the knowledge is passed down both through behaviour, through talking, and stories. Yeah, and it's also evidence to that you went back to a very similar environment that you knew. You didn't leave the environment that you knew so well, unless there was drastic problems with the climate. And I personally think that this is what goes against these people going out there and trying to mimic that, is that they've got absolutely no knowledge of that particular area, the flora, the fauna, things like that. Well,
yeah, and it's not even an environment that they've grown up in.
Exactly,
as a modern
at
Brit.
home. Yeah,
You know, it's not like, I mean, because I might have a little bit more knowledge about a British forest than I do certainly about a Bulgarian forest.
Yeah.
You know, kind of thing. And yeah, so yeah, as you say, they've got no chance in that respect. And I suppose I'm left asking, what is the point of this experiment? Are we just showing that modern people, or actually not even modern people, any people, thrust into an environment that they don't understand, with tools that they've never used before and clothes that were a bit dodgy, will have a hard time, or may make it work? I mean, what's the validity of that? I'm sure they're going to make it work in some way, but that just tells you that people are very adaptable. Doesn't really tell you anything about...
It's like zombie apocalypse theory. How is society going to work? I mean, you know, it's getting off track here a little bit. I mean, the way we see The Walking Dead, society takes on whole different facets, but one of the most interesting things that I find in it is that they actually, in my opinion, dodge on some of the violence of the society to make it more acceptable in the television show.
They do, but I mean, I suppose you're talking about a broader philosophy of whether or not violence is endemic in human society. I mean, I'm asking a very specific question, and that is, in this instance, what does this prove? Is
it an actual experiment? Because I mean, they're passing it off as an experiment. It could just be, this is TV, we'll call that an experiment.
Yeah.
My thinking is, and we talked about this last night too, we could film an actual experiment. If we got, let's say, 10 paleoarchaeologists together and said, okay, we're going to stick you in an environment that mimics European Mesolithic conditions. So I don't know whereabouts you would find those exact conditions, but I'm sure it wouldn't take much research to find a similar idea. I mean, the other thing is you're talking about an environment that held creatures like, for the end of it, mammoths and large ungulates that don't exist today.
Well, and therefore an environment that doesn't exist today as well.
Exactly.
And that, so again, that's where the validity comes into questioning. So you're taking a winter-based Mesolithic moment, putting it in the summer in Bulgaria, in a landscape that it was never adapted for. What is the point of that experiment? And this is where I could understand. For example, there's been some amazing work done in terms of experimental archaeology, where people try and replicate, as I was saying last night, whether or not you can eat a conker, for example. And you treat it a little bit like a tuber, or tubers are treated, say, in Australia.
Well, I mean, you've got to, I suppose, explain what conkers are to a lot of people, because a lot of people, I didn't know what a conker was.
You must have seen, like, you know, when kids in the 1940s in British films, they played conkers. Yeah? So they're the little brown balls, and they're the seed, they're the pod of a particular type of tree. They come out of a little green sort of spiky shell. They often look rather beautiful, rather sort of varnished almost. Basically, they're not good to eat.
Oh, we can put a picture up anyway.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course, we'll put a picture up. But yeah, they're not good to eat. So if you try and eat them, you'll get sick, if not die. But you can process them. So that is a really valid experiment, trying to understand a potential food source from a time and from a place which has been lost to us, and from people which have been lost to us. But actually, this brings us to, I suppose, the archaeological underfitting of the thing. And was it Clint Janulis or Janulis?
Yes.
He seems to be an interesting chap. Former SAS or former Special Forces. Medic. He's I think a doctoral candidate at Oxford. So he's doing, for example, cognitive archaeology. One of his interests are labelled as. And that's wonderful. That's great. But again, this is where TV producers step in, because what he was being asked to say, I imagine. What he was being asked to say on camera was very...
you wouldn't catch any well, you wouldn't catch most academic archaeologists saying anything or pandering to this kind of television. They'd see it as filth.
Well, potentially, and the thing is, I'm not saying that there's no room for this stuff, because there is. I mean, I'm glad that people are interested in it.
Yeah, we're interested to see what would happen if we chucked a whole bunch of Paleolithic archaeologists out there, because they know what they're doing, in a sense.
But for example, the language that he's being encouraged to use is sort of reinforcing weird stereotypes, such as
Stone Age.
Well, Stone Age. Fire is the machine that will drive this camp. And again, using the language of machines, machinery, technology implies, and also actually, I've forgotten who it was that used it, but someone said something like, "Oh yes, we're living nothing quite like living this primitive lifestyle, is there?"
Primitive,
and yet they're already almost failing at it. You know, so they're not quite seeing the irony.
Well, 2 people already left.
Yeah, exactly. They're not really seeing the irony of the fact that you may think it's primitive, but you can't do it.
Exactly.
Ergo, it's not primitive. It's actually damn complicated.
Well, there's a lot of technical skills. I mean, we in Australia we have classes in high school which basically pander to this kind of these kind of skills, outdoor education. And what we do is we take those classes as a stepping stone into going into university and studying biology and further outdoor education to become things like rangers. Zookeepers would study all those kinds of things. Not just necessarily say that these people in their daily job go out and survive in the wilderness, no, but it's certainly things they learn because they do work in an environment where the potential of being lost in the wilderness could happen or eventuate, amongst other things. But I suppose the interesting thing as well is that you've got full-grown adults in this show, varying between the ages of about 18 to 60, 60 something, and they've basically given them a whole bunch of flint, right? And as like for archaeologists who have studied the Paleolithic, the Neolithic and Mesolithic, flint knapping is a skill that is developed over many years. It's like writing. You've got to do it for a long time, and you've got to see what other people are doing to make your own tools, to make good functional tools. And
if I said to you, and you didn't know what I was talking about, write an alphabet. What?
Exactly.
What? And so the skills are, and again, it's really hard actually to put yourself in that situation. But the skill of flint knapping is an immensely nuanced one, and very. I mean, I'm far from an expert. I've done a little bit of knapping, but you very quickly learn that actually it's a talent. It's a talent. It's a skill. It's also a very carefully managed process. It's not just.
Yeah, there you go. There's a spearhead.
Yeah,
perfect.
exactly. You've got to be shape. You've got to shape it. You've got to have the shape in your head all the way through the process.
Is cognitive thought. Forward thinking. But the other interesting thing, I mean, to go back to your workshop, I mean, you won't even risk allowing kids to nap flint primarily because it's dangerous. For example, we did it in university, obviously studying Indigenous Australian archaeology, and we had to wear leather across the knee. You have to wear gloves of one description or another. To be
welding mask.
Yeah, well, not quite a welding mask. No, you do wear safety glasses though. But my concern is that if you've got middle-aged people wearing this kind of stuff who are actually studying this, to then throw people who have had no experience of flint knapping. There's a good chance somebody could end up slicing, a ligament, or, I've seen people who have sliced their hands open doing this stuff, and it's
really easy. I mean, the edges that you produce using flint knapping are
they're sharper they're sharper than modern day surgical tools. Admittedly, they don't last as long as modern day surgical tools. But for example, obsidian, there's a very interesting story that went around about an archaeologist who asked the surgeon to do his vasectomy using obsidian tools he'd napped. Now, I have it on good authority that story is true, so I suppose this is kind of showing how dangerous this stuff can be.
Oh wow! Well, I feel a bit sick. Well, I suppose again, I don't know. I mean, this video's been going on for a while now, I guess. But I suppose in summary, personally, I'm feeling a little bit, well, very sceptical.
Yep.
I'm having a bit of a hard time knowing that lots of this drama will be manufactured, so we don't even actually necessarily know what to criticise in this experiment.
Because all these kind of shows are.
It's all sort of set up,
yeah.
And that's again. So we can't actually necessarily, in a valid way, comment on the thing. But I suppose I don't know. Well, I'll keep watching it, and it'd be interesting to see what the reaction is. But then again, going off things like the photo shoot, going off the press releases from this thing, it sounds like they're just out for. I don't know, a wilderness experience. They're not really. It's not an experiment. I mean, Big Brother was originally labelled as an experiment when it first came out here, and it's become a joke. So I'm pretty sure we're not into some grand public archaeology experiment, folks. Sadly, yeah.
No, but I mean, like I said before, it will be interesting if maybe one day if we get a license to do an actual experiment like this, where we get maybe paleoanthropological, paleoarchaeological students / lecturers or teachers to maybe live a couple of weeks in an environment like this. I'm sure other people have thought that too, or maybe they have done it. But if you guys actually have any ideas concerning something like that, or maybe an experiment that has already happened, please write in and tell us about it, because we'd be interested to see it and potentially just advertise it up on the Facebook page and YouTube, just to show people.
Well, I mean, I know Ray Mears did some excellent work actually with some archaeologists. But then again, as you say, there are loads of archaeologists out there who'd love to do this. I mean, some of them I'm not sure would look too good in Mesolithic clothing. I mean, I count myself in that actually as well. But that'd be weird.
Well, I mean, did you notice?
I mean, archaeologists aren't the most beautiful people in the world, are they?
It's archaeology sexy, man. No, I think one of the things is as well, now that we're actually talking about this, if you take a look at the people that they've got in this, all of them are pretty, well, I wouldn't say the prettiest people on earth, but they're attractive enough. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you saw a lot of the guys in there were quite ripped with tattoos. I mean, actually, to be honest, I did like one of the tattoos the guy had. It looked like the tree of life, and it was straight across his back. But I suppose that that's kind of like pandering towards making the show even more attractive. I mean, sex sells, we all know it. But I suppose it's a cheap shot saying that this is an experiment at this point.
Yeah, and as I say, if nothing else, because you can't adequately replicate or critique it, because we don't actually know what's going on between the edits. I mean, recently actually we had a meeting with some TV types, and in that conversation it was quite clear that not to say the people that we were talking to, but that certainly the culture that surrounds them. They said this, not me. They said that. That you have to be aware of that entertainment element, and that element of, being scientific isn't always good for TV, apparently. And actually, I was thinking about that last night, and I was thinking it's a shame that it's people who are experts in putting on shows who make these decisions, as opposed to people who are experts in the field. Because actually, you can find some really interesting stuff to put in these TV shows if you just give it a chance. Beyond, for example, sex or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, this is partly why we do what we do, because if you're a scientist, an archaeologist in specific, I mean, we would love to have you on Archaeo-Soup in one fashion or another. If I mean, we predominantly these days make documentaries. Admittedly, we're getting to the stage now where people are actually, like you said, from television, are actually coming to us and asking us our thoughts and hopes, I suppose, about where we're going. And I suppose in one way, Archaeo-Soup's main tenet is to basically show the science in a light that the scientists want it to be shown. we do.
Well, and I suppose in that sense, the reason why we're so excited by it,
Yeah.
you know, we're not just train spotters here. This stuff is genuinely exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's not just, oh, look at this amazing little snail. You know, it's sort of like this snail. Oh wow, you know, it's genuinely interesting, and that's what we want to portray.
Yeah, we're not just pandering to that drama factor, but it is, to us anyway, very interesting, and I'm sure to a lot of other people out there.
So I suppose from our perspective here, it's a case of watch this space, watch and wait. I guess see how this TV series pans out, but also I don't know if they don't get it right, maybe one day someone else might have to come along and do it properly.
Yeah, that's one thing. Yeah, can you recommend anything if people are interested in this this age of human history, which is the predominancy of our history? Can you recommend any books or anything to watch instead of this to compare it to?
Well, I like to say I'd look for Ray Mears Paleolithic kind of stuff. There's some wonderful work that he did there, looking at actually Paleo, Meso, and I think some Neolithic. Also, there's a wonderful book called After the Ice, which is part novel, part textbook, and you're walked through the sort of this period in time that they're trying to portray in the TV show. In the manner of a novel, and so a guy called John Lubbock, who's an archaeologist and banker who invented bank holidays so that he could go digging. He walks from I suppose the beginning. Well, no, actually, it's from the beginning of the expansion of potential for humanity in terms of say hunting and gathering in the Mesolithic, all the way through farming, and it's great. So do that. Look at that. Yeah, it's a good read.
Okay, guys. Anyway, we've probably dragged this on as long as we can, and coffee. Anyway, guys, we hope you found this interesting, and we'll see you again in the next couple of days.
Yep.
See you later.